ঐক্য, আমাৰ সংস্কৃতি। মই জিনা ৰাজকুমাৰী গোস্বামী ধন্যবাদ জনাইছো নমস্কাৰ।
My name is Ashok Khosla, and I'm here to all of you because I'm a friend of Ranjit Barthakur's and a great admirer of the work he has done. But to us, of course, and hopefully to the rest of humanity. I work for an organization called Development Alternatives. It's based in New Delhi. And we work on what is called sustainable development. This evening, you have heard two deeply inspiring speeches, insightful speeches, about what conservation means, not just to the Northeast, not just to Assam, but to the whole country and to the whole world. I have had the privilege of being the head of major conservation organizations around the world, including the World Conservation Union, the IUCN, and a variety of other organizations where I have been privileged to see the interconnections that both Victor and Bitu talked about. I thought I would share with you for the next few minutes the little insights I get from my work in India, which basically, in one sense, confirm what you've heard already this evening. So in one sense, I don't need to say it. But in another sense, extends it to a meaning that I think was greatly important to our fathers, Rabindranath Barthakur in his case, and Jagannath Khosla in mine. This evening, we're going to celebrate a great life, but we're also going to pay tribute to others, many others, who have tried to be inspired by those lives as well. So I won't repeat my thanks to Ranjit for having invited me, but let me just very quickly take you through a little journey that represents, in a sense, what my organization and I have been doing for the last 30 years. What Rabindranath Barthakur represents for me is an exemplary life of caring, but not just caring, of commitment. And not just commitment, but most important, of courage. The people we will be paying tribute to this evening represent those three values. The central focus of these people is both nature and people. People like that little girl and her sister. People like that couple living in the outskirts of a town. People like that little child trying to get a fire going. People like that woman who is one of 500,000 people in our country who dies every year prematurely because of what is euphemistically called indoor air pollution from the junk she breathes in the kitchen. The cancer, the lung diseases, and all the other things that go with them just wipe out enormous numbers of lives. And we also have to recognize that this is a major issue. And all the people, 1.3 billion around the world, something like 400 million people, mostly women in our country, who have to find water and it's not even fit for drinking. There's a whole range of issues of water, of energy, of sanitation, of everything that we take for granted, people sitting in this room. not available to large numbers of people. It takes that first attribute that I was talking about, caring, to realize that this is our problem. It's not just that poor woman's problem. In fact, the reason that I respected the kind of caring that Rabindranath Barthakur and my father, Ashok Khosla, took this caring to, the level that they took the caring to, was that it became an outrage. For them, it was a matter that was not acceptable. And through their sons, they were willing to try and see what could be done about it. One has to wonder that after 60-odd years of independence, we have millions, hundreds of millions of people like that little girl and her brother. How do we know that she couldn't have been a Marie Curie or a Mother Teresa? Did she ever have a chance? And the whole purpose of the work that we do, whether it's in the forest or in the city, has to be that we understand these relationships. We have to now be responsible for building a nation that is fit for our children. All our children. And the first part of that is to meet basic human needs. Let me just talk a little bit about that. Fulfilling basic needs is things like water and food and shelter and secure tenure and health and education and personal growth and participation and empowerment to be able to take part in the decisions that affect us. Personal security, being able to walk down the street or your village and not feel threatened. And personal security for everyone, for all our citizens. And above all, of course, we need jobs. Something that our decision makers, our policy makers sometimes have forgotten. But we also need to build our resource base, regenerate a resource base that has disappeared. And many of the people that we will be honoring this evening have been focusing on this very important aspect. And the resource base is, of course, things like forests and rivers and wetlands and soils and lands. Can we take what we have, the beauties that Bittu showed us so beautifully, and make them basically into deserts, into burnt up forests, into nothingness? You know, the world today is in fever. It has a very high fever, which basically is showing up symptoms like climate change, floods and droughts and forest fires, the extinction of species. I'm sure many of you know this species here that I'm showing, the rosy periwinkle. It's now restricted to a few hectares in Madagascar. But you know, when those few hectares disappear, the only known source of cure for childhood leukemia will have gone with it. So the next time you know of a child with blood cancer, you know that there's nothing you can do about it because we're very close to losing the final cure. I don't know how many of you saw this in the newspapers, but 2 months ago, on January 5th, 3 months ago, one bluefin tuna, sold for $1.75 million. One fish. What does that mean? That means two things. One, it's become such a scarce, such a threatened species that people are willing to pay any amount for it. And the second, which is worse, is at that price, who's going to let the last one go? At that price, you would be crazy not to grab it and sell it to the next Japanese. 1.3 million, that's what it represents, the price of extinction. Deserts, 50,000 square kilometers around the world, 15,000 in our own country, every year. Our energy resources are disappearing. We're now already over the peak and we're coming down rapidly. We're actually on peak of pretty well everything. Food production has peaked. Fisheries are collapsing. According to the FAO, there will never be a fish catch as large as there was 5 years ago. Phosphorus. The phosphate is as critical an element for food production as carbon and nitrogen. Once that goes, and it's now about to peak, where is the food going to come from? So we are actually on a variety of fronts in very serious trouble. And we keep growing exponentially. We keep going up and up and up. The fact is that infinite growth on a finite planet is impossible. This curve is called overshoot and collapse. And that's the story that we are facing literally within the next couple of decades on so many fronts that one has to wonder about the 3 grandchildren that Bitu was talking about. It's not going to be for them, it's going to be in our lifetimes. We are going to be fighting in the street for food. We are going to be the ones who cannot find any species to cure our cancer when we get old. And look at that. For decades and decades, the price of food was constant. But since 2006, it's exploded. It's exploded so much that governments have fallen, countries have had riots, revolutions, changes of government, and things are going to get worse. This is literally in the last 3-4 years, since 2006, 7 years. The ecological footprint, the footprint which represents the proportion of land that there is for each one of us and the amount that we use, well, India's ecological footprint is now close to that of the world, which is that we are using 60% more resources than are produced sustainably in our land mass. You may well say, well, how can you do that? How can you use more than you produce? Well, any banker will tell you if you've got money in the bank, capital, you can draw it down till there isn't any left. Then you can't have any more. Well, you know, Mother Nature gave us a huge bank account to start with. All we're doing now is just drawing it down, and very rapidly. Drawing it down at a rate that many of our calculations show that by the year 2100, those overshoot and collapse situations will have happened over and over again on many fronts. Coral reefs, gone. Ocean acidification, near critical. So the second thing the second value that I appreciated from the stories I heard about Ranjit Barthakur's father and my own was commitment. Commitment to take responsibility, to be a part of the solution. Something that I hope one could say is true of everyone in this hall. That's why we're here. But without that commitment, we can just leave it to somebody else. It may be a Sardarji with a blue turban. It may be an Italian woman with some nice pink sari, but it's not going to solve our problem. The issues of responsibility are really critical. I think India is a little bit less than fortunate in having gone through an incredible freedom movement in which our forefathers were really responsible. They fought for us. They made a new country for us. They made all the sacrifices that were necessary. They took responsibility. That was real commitment. But within a few decades of our independence, the generational attitudes, if you like, our national culture, seemed very quickly to deteriorate. We were given a gift, and since none of us in the next generation had to fight for it, we sort of took it for granted. And my worry is that today, neither the schools, nor the media, nor the government, nor the religious or faith organizations, but most important of all, not even the parents at home are inculcating the kinds of value systems that we need to survive as a nation. I've heard parents tell children things that nobody in Mahatma Gandhi's generation would have thought of saying. The reason that India has become such a material-minded, greedy place is partly because parents have become that way too. The reason that we've got to take care of these are things that Bittu described in some detail, and I'm not going to take you through them in the same detail. I just want to say that for a nation of 1.2 billion people, we do have to think different from what we're doing now. Nobody actually knows, not even the best economists in this country, how many jobs we really need to create. If you ask an economist, they give you all kinds of answers about whether you include women, whether you include left-handed people, whether you include people who work only part-time, but you never get a straight answer, how many jobs do we need to create? And if you don't know how many jobs you need to create, then no policymaker is going to be able to do anything about it. If you don't know what you're supposed to do, you don't know the numbers describing the situation, then how do you make decisions that address those? So basically, my calculation, and many other people's calculations, is that in India we need to create somewhere around 400 million jobs in the next 20 years. Now that's like 20 million jobs a year. 20 million jobs is not very far off, by the way, from the manifestos of the major political parties. They usually talk about 10 to 15 crores, so we're not far off. Let us say 20 million jobs. Now, if you want to create these jobs in the globalized economy to make India competitive with the rest of the world, each of those jobs is going to be needing an investment of the order of $500,000. It costs $1.3 million to create a job in the US. The capital investment for creating one workplace. It costs about $1.7 million to create a workplace in Japan because they're a bit more automated and mechanized. In most Europe, it costs over 1.3 million. Germany is 1.2 million. In India, let us assume that we could get away with $500,000. Well, that means that every year we have to find $10 trillion just to invest in making jobs, which is about 5-6 times the GDP of the country. So clearly, every year we're going to have more and more jobless people if we are going to if we're going to decide on the basis of being globally competitive. The whole purpose of our decision-making, our governance, our future thinking should be to create the kinds of jobs that we're celebrating this evening with our awards. Those don't need $500,000. Those produce incredible results for society and for the economy. So if we are going to do that, then you need basically a very different approach to creating, empowering communities, providing them with all the things that they need. This is a diagram that appeared on the 1990 Human Development Report of the UNDP. It's what I call the champagne glass theory of life. Because what it says is, this is 1990. Today, this glass has stretched all the way across here. This says, hello? In those days, top 10% got something of the order of 85% of the wealth and the income. Today, of course, we know that the top 1% get something like 50% of the world's wealth and income. Unfortunately, India is sort of like the world in this case. We have a few people who are the top, get everything, large numbers of people behind, got left out. The top ones suffer from a disease that is basically terminal. It's a life-threatening disease which is called affluenza. And it's something that is very appealing because this is a disease that brings a certain amount of pleasure rather than pain, but it's very temporary before it becomes very painful. And the others suffer from another disease called povertitis. And these two are linked. They go more or less hand in hand. One causes the other. We all know that the people in the first category live in a country called India, probably about 300 or 400 million of them, and they have everything. They have beautiful homes, they have cars, they have shopping malls, they have everything. They've got all the things that they can consume. They have houses that cost $1 billion, one house, one family. They are thinking of making flats, which cost that kind of money. And the numbers of millionaires keeps growing up. It's quite good. So life in India for the people with affluenza is, at the moment, pretty good. And the government helps them. The government supports them through its policies to increase growth. And every day, every newspaper, every headline is about how much FDI we got. Not about how many rhinos got killed, how much FDI we got. How much the Sensex has gone up. How the growth rate is doing. And how much foreign portfolio investments are coming in. That's what is driving the affluenza into a worse and worse disease. Then there's the other 800 million who live in the other country, which happens to be in the same place, same time, called Bharat, and they live like that. Now I show you this picture because this is a woman who lives in an area of the country where I work a lot, Bundelkhand, in the central part of India, in Madhya Pradesh. And you notice that this woman, her entire belongings are in that picture. Everything she owns in the world is in that picture. In fact, you might even say her whole world is in that picture. Now, just think about it. If that is your whole world, then how much can you contribute to making your nation a great place for everyone? And the worst part of it is that the government doesn't even know how many poor people there are. There are estimates from some, like Arjun Sen Gupta, which say that 77% of India is poor. And there are other people like Montek Singh Ahluwalia, which claim that 37%. Now there is a difference between 77% and 37%. How are you making decisions if you know whether you got 27 million or got 300 million? We do have a mindset problem. And the number of hungry people, well, that's what the government statistics show. They've now leveled off. They claim things are getting better. And if you plot the hungry people and the millionaires together, you see a very interesting correlation. One might ask on that diagram whether the more the millionaires there are, the more hungry people there will be. and whether there's a causal relationship. It takes courage. That's my third value. It took caring, it took commitment to get us here, of the type that Rabindranath Barthakur and Jagannath Khosla had, but it takes courage that they exemplified more than anything else. It takes courage to think different. We can't go on the way we've been going on. We can't go on with the mindsets that got us here, because here is not good enough. Here is not about sufficiency, it's about greed. They have to have each one of these kinds of capital. Unfortunately, environmentalists often forget these ones. And I think that that's also a danger. So if you're talking about sustainability, we have to nurture all kinds of capital. A few weeks ago, I was in Bhutan because I'm working with in the primary on the whole area of gross national happiness, development paradigm. And their thinking is so Buddhist, so deeply, purely Buddhist, that they sort of don't even want to think about capital. They want to see this as a holistic future for everyone in terms of all the things. But it seems to me that if we are not going to leave behind for those 3 grandchildren and all the other grandchildren good amounts of each one of these, then they're going to be in very serious trouble. So we have systemic issues. There are all kinds of interlinkages that make it very difficult for us to solve the problems. We have to solve the basic needs of everyone and regenerate the environment. My own organization works a lot in these fields. We don't work very much directly or with plants or with habitats that conservation organizations that are represented here do, but we work a great deal about bringing back the health of these forms of capital through structures like these, through reforestation projects, through a variety of other ways of rejuvenating the environment and its resource base. May I interrupt for 1 second and ask Ranjit, do you want me to continue for a few moments? Or I got a message that we needed a little bit. Do you think I could tell them about the blue economy? All right. Probably the biggest breakthrough that people like us can promote and make a difference with is living with nature in every aspect. Not just living with it, but learning from it, being inspired by it, and by using it to our advantage. Remember, nature has had 4.5 billion years of innovation. Anything that didn't work was recalled billions of years ago. The things that nature gives us today are actually things that work. If you really think about it, there's no waste in nature. Everything is cascaded. All energy systems, all water systems are closed loop systems in nature. Nature has perfected of maintaining a sustainable ecology and therefore a sustainable economy. And nature has perfected huge numbers of technologies that a couple of hundred years ago we knew some of and have forgotten because we've fallen in love with machines. But nature knows how to pull water out of the air, even in the driest of deserts. There's a beetle in the Namibian desert in Southwest Africa which produces enough water out of the air in the morning from the dew at dawn that other animals can actually drink of it. There are in nature all kinds of materials, all kinds of processes, energies, water systems that basically come from nothing. And they work at ambient temperatures, ambient pressures. You don't need huge factories with 1,000 atmospheres of pressure and 2,000 degrees centigrade temperatures. They all work at normal temperatures, pressures, under normal circumstances. So we wrote a book, this one here called The Blue Economy, which lists about 100 of these technologies. There are something like 2,300 of them already documented, on the basis of which you can generate enterprises, make new kinds of products and solutions. And these are essentially ways of creating jobs, widening the distribution of benefits to everyone, and highly efficient processes which don't destroy the environment. We can talk about those another time, but essentially it seems to me that we have to use our imagination. This is a project that my organization, one of my organizations did in Colombia, in Latin America. It's right next to the Orinoco River, next to Venezuela. We took 8,000 hectares of land that was like that, 8,000 hectares of land, which was so bad that we got it for $1 a hectare. The price of the land was essentially zero. It was a horrible, highly acidic savanna with virtually nothing in it, except there was some fugitive, some criminal fugitive living in every 4 or 5 square kilometers, running away from the law. Within 5 years, 6 years, we converted it into a tropical rainforest by good scientific work, created huge amounts of very pure, highly saleable drinking water, huge carbon sink, a massive amount of biodiversity, a tropical forest which could produce logs for paper, for timber, biodiesel, and huge numbers of jobs. So it is possible to do things different, but it takes courage, because everybody will tell you, no, you can't do that, because we're used to doing other things. So the question I have to leave with you is that little girl ever going to have a chance to live a decent life? My ambition for her is that she becomes, as I said earlier, another Marie Curie, or at least equivalent, because she has the potential. But we've never given her a chance. And the only Photoshop thing in this whole thing is that flag. Everything else is real. So I just wanted to bring us back to this beautiful garden in the Barthakur house here. This garden, which is in the middle of a city, represents a statement that we can have everything. We can have a decent life, but we can also bequeath a huge legacy for our children in the form of what nature's wonders can do for us. So we need to bring wilderness and civilization together, and I think it's very important for us to recognize one of the reasons why we're here, which is to celebrate the legacy of Shri Rabindranath Barthakur. And I want to thank Ranjit for making it possible for me to join you here. Ranjit, would you like to come and join me up here?
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you very much. I was just wondering if I could use this podium. I think it'd be more comfortable on this. Thank you. We have, hello? We have a slight hiccup in our program, and the program is hiccup because the Chief Minister has unfortunately been held up due to matters of